Have you ever wondered who really shapes Bitcoin's public narrative? Legacy media giants or vocal advocates on social media? In this episode of Bitcoin for Millennials, I'm joined by Fernando Nikolić. He's the VP of Marketing and Communications at Blockstream and the founder of BitcoinPerception.com, where he tracks how media narratives and information battles influence Bitcoin's global adoption.
In 2025, I think we've kind of like officially exited the era where everyone learns about Bitcoin at the same time in the same way. What I'm seeing is like not one single adoption curve. It's just 1,000 narrative micro curves.
This episode is a front row seat to understanding Bitcoin's battle for attention and what it means for you. I really enjoyed this deep conversation with Fernando, and I hope that you do too. And if you do, please like and subscribe here on YouTube or follow me on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. I really appreciate the support. Now let's dive in to this episode.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back. It's been a while. Happy to do round two, man. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, I'm very happy you're here because I think we can have a very timely conversation around, let's call it the media fragmentation and the narrative warfare around Bitcoin. You have a platform called, now it's called Perception or BTC Perception, right? Where you track hundreds of outlets that talk about Bitcoin, that write about Bitcoin, and you follow the sentiment. And so we'll talk about that. People can also check it out. I'll link that in the description, of course. So we're going to talk about that. But I think to start at like narrative warfare, which I find a very interesting term. Let's just start at the basics. So you describe narrative warfare as a fight for Bitcoin's public image as a decentralized system. And so in 2025, this has been going on for 16 years, of course, and it started on this little internet forum, and it grew and grew. And just before we started talking, you mentioned, like the very early memes, like hardcore Bitcoin memes helped you a lot in your journey. And I have to say, I think also for me, but in like 2025, who do you think is shaping the narrative more? Is that mainstream media or still Bitcoin advocates on X, whether public like Michael Saylor or just anonymous creators that we all know? What are your current thoughts on it?
I mean, it's everything that you just mentioned and probably thousands more, right? I think my kind of like current thesis is that in 2025, I think we've kind of like officially exited the era where everyone learns about Bitcoin at the same time in the same way, so to say. I think 2021 might have been, the last cycle where retail and institutions were in the same room, so to speak. And now it's like fully fragmented. I mean, you could always backtrack and say, hey, it was fragmented as well in 2021, but it's like 2025, like the dimension as to how things are fragmented today is really mind-blowing to me. And I think it's just going to splinter even more in the future. What I'm seeing is like not one single adoption curve. It's just 1,000 narrative micro curves playing out in parallel. One guy reads Bloomberg, another follows a Bitcoiner on Nostr, a third gets onboarded through a podcast about like Argentina inflation. All of them are going to the same destination essentially, but they are convinced, or they take that journey through different stories and different narratives that convinces them, right? And I think this is really important to talk about in 2025. I think it, because the way that I see it, it means that Bitcoin is no longer kind of like waiting for this mass consensus to happen anymore. It's instead like pressure building silently in these echo chambers. And I think it's interesting, like when all of these like splintered echo chambers connect, that's where I think things will get loud pretty fast. So essentially, my thesis is, ask yourself not what the Bitcoin narrative is anymore, but like ask yourself, whose narrative do you trust enough to actually act on? I think is a better kind of like approach to understanding how the narrative wars is going to affect Bitcoin adoption from now on and into the future.
The splintering of this narrative, I think, is very logical, and I agree with what you say. Like it's a very, very good thing, because that means, the message of Bitcoin and what it's a solution for just spreads even further. It's not this narrow niche anymore.
I think media, we can ask our parents or generations before them. Media were distributed in a way that everybody was kind of like watching the same thing, right? There was like 2-3 channels max, 4 or 5 radio stations. The whole concept of the water cooler talk, the day after a big news or something big happening in the media was a thing that distributed far and wide enough so that you went to a random office with just random NPC employers and you had something to talk about because everybody was exposed to the same thing. And I think that was a way to drive culture in any direction. It was these shared moments in a way that was driven by media that drove the culture over time, right? And now, and it's just going to get worse, in my opinion, we now entered an era where content consumption is fully siloed. So I think, one Uber driver might have 2 or 3 YouTube channels that they just always go back to, that they fully trust and believe in, because that influencer sees the world through the same lens, or at least shares some values or whatever that they agree with. So it's like, okay, this is my guy. And then they might read a couple of other outlets and follow a couple of people on X, and kind of like feeds into the algorithms of like, this is what I like. So that's the signal that you get back from all these platforms that are driven algorithmically, right? The end result of that is fully siloed kind of like individual narrative journeys. And when you really think about the average person, nobody really builds a balanced content diet, right? It's just with fiat debasement, things are getting harder and harder. People have 2-3 jobs, families and whatever. You don't really have the time anymore to like sit down and read books, listen to podcasts, and kind of like create a nuanced view of the world. You don't have the mind space for that. So you just need to like, hey, I need to do my day-to-day chores. I got my responsibilities, and I don't want to go insane and kind of like take all the information. It's like having a superpower where you can hear everyone's thought in the room. Imagine going into a room and you can hear like 25 people's thoughts at the same time. You're literally going insane. So people just need like a very narrow lens to understand the world at some level, for them to be like, okay, I understand the world, I believe in certain things, and I have other people that are sharing my view. And that creates like these micro narratives. So, people, and when it comes to Bitcoin, people that are bullish on ordinals will be very different from those that are laser focused on the ETFs. But it's the same thing, same protocol, just different angles. So the problem isn't necessarily like tribalism, but it's the illusion of universality. Like people assume that their lens is the default. And I think that's the warfare. That's where people are going to clash. And they are going to also be clashing because they are subscribing to outlets that have a monetary incentive, a financial incentive, to have people going at each other and kind of like fight it out online. So, yeah, super interesting time they were living in.
Now that Bitcoin is doing well, a lot of people feel that they should be the contrarian or something. So they never talk about Bitcoin, but now that Bitcoin is going up, you see all these takes about the bubble and tulips are back. I replied to some guy like, okay, 2017 called, like come up with something else. But the point is, those narratives are very strong, right? They've persisted over the past 8 to 10 years, even the whole tulip mania, scam, Ponzi, and whatnot. How do you look at this? Like, especially in this phase, like, how does it affect people's ability to understand Bitcoin's value and purpose when this all comes clashing, when there is a time that they should be paying more attention now that, we're entering a different phase of this bull market again?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's super interesting. And I think the fact that these like old arguments from past cycles keeps coming back says a lot about like our collective memory, and like, okay, you think you have a hot take really in 2025, you're just like, scraping off I don't know,
the remnants.
Yeah, you're scraping up like 2017 content for like Buttcoin subreddit or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely insane. But a lot of people, they don't know that. For them, for a lot of their audience, they're like, "Whoa, this is like a really interesting take." You mean to say that this Bitcoin bull market is driven by Tether printing? We've seen all of these things before, but those of us who recognize these old arguments, we are in the minority. Like these influencers are also behaving in the same way as legacy outlets. Since you also mentioned them, let's put them in the same bucket because I think they have a lot of commonalities. What's common about these two is that, they are essentially hostage to their audiences, right?
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp is leading this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of relying on one institution, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a cold storage multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent custodians, where no single party can move your funds alone, providing an unprecedented level of security. Your assets are protected by a 100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, with all transactions fully auditable on-chain and only executed at your direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all time. Beyond custody, OnRamp provides comprehensive Bitcoin services that include trading, lending, inheritance planning, and IRAs. You can view them as your private Bitcoin banking partner tailored to your wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps you secure your generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. You can sign up at onrampbitcoin.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. If you first want to learn more, you can also book a free consultation via their website to speak with one of their Bitcoin custody experts. Tell them you came through me, and they'll take extra good care of you.
And there's, when you really think about like the incentives that are behind influencers and legacy outlets, being able to continue being in business, is that they are audience captured in the sense that they have spent a lot of time educating people about like the wrong thing and putting Bitcoin in a negative sentiment, for example, through such a long time that they have built an audience that now share that belief. If they were to pivot to like pro Bitcoin or any like kind of like a neutral balanced take on Bitcoin after so long of like spewing misinformation and FUD, I mean, their risk is losing that audience that they have built over time, right? So if they have trained their audience to see Bitcoin as a scam, they just need to double down on that angle, if that makes sense. So they've sunk years into shaping a certain worldview, and doubling down is cheaper than actually rebuilding the trust. Like imagine, some influencers, and you also have seen some legacy outlets who've had the luxury of actually pivoting, right? Like the data that I track on bitcoinperception.com is, you can I don't know, you can check CNBC, you can check Bloomberg, and there's like a definitive time in the calendar that says here is when they pivoted and they started not only shifting the sentiment but also including topics about Bitcoin, like certain aspects, certain segments of the industry and stuff like that, that they never touched before, right? So you see, like, there's a heightened interest, there's a broader coverage, and they were, profitable enough to be able to sit down and have that meeting in their editorial board and say, hey, this Bitcoin thing is real. Let's cover it because we have in our audience, we have investors who want to be educated about it. But then, at the same token, the Wall Street Journal that you mentioned, obviously they don't have that luxury. They're struggling with their audience. So they have been peddling all this negative misinformation for so long. If they were to pivot on this, the little left, the little audience they have would just vanish. So it's a real financial incentive that is driving all of this in the backside.
Yeah. Thinking about the words sunk cost fallacy.
Yep, definitely.
Right? I'm thinking about progressive people aren't really that progressive.
Yeah, no.
It's about changing your mind, man. And I think, these bigger outlets, just like big corporations, they are just made up by other people, and they all go through their own learning journey. And I think this battle of like fiat money incentives with what you actually think is the truth, I find that fascinating.
It is.
And that's why I do believe that eventually we will win, because like my individual prosperity and that of my family goes above and beyond any organization that I'm affiliated to, right? So even the people that work in media, and there have been several people actually that worked in media. I'm thinking about Nico Yilk, who's an Austrian finance journalist who went, totally, all in on Bitcoin, talking about it from, his expertise. There are more and more people that make that switch, which makes sense, right? Because once you get to the point that you understand why Bitcoin exists, that the fiat money system is designed against you, how can you defend that anymore, right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because Bitcoin is about opting out in a lot of sense, like opting out of the fiat monetary system. But for a lot of people who have narrative as a profession or a career, opting out also means like quitting the BBC and opening up a Substack, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there is this reporter that used to be in Financial Times. Her name is Isabella. I think her last name is Kaminsky or something similar. I'm probably butchering it. But she is like, she's at Politico now, but she started her own Substack and also her own like Twitter account of her own like media media agency or something like that, because she probably felt the need to have that freedom to write about the things that she wanted to write about. And for a lot of people, opting out is really quitting the system, quitting these institutions that have a real financial incentive to spew misinformation about any arbitrary topic. So it's really interesting how that works, because I come from the music business industry. I started my career at Universal Music. And I see a lot of like parallels with, the way torrenting and the pirate bay specifically disrupted the entire music industry, right? And the kind of like the reaction from the big music labels were to shut it down, right? Like they got sued, like they had like Hollywood lawyers and all kinds of like music industry lawyers try to sue them, and they couldn't stop torrenting, like they just couldn't. LimeWire and Napster, I mean, they shut it down, but the technology lived on, right? So they were really desperate, and they tried to do that. But also, when they understood that they couldn't shut down the websites, they started like buying these little indie labels that specialized in music that the executives at the big record labels would never hear about, right? So in order for them to stay relevant, they needed to buy up these little small indie labels and say, oh yeah, we have like a hip hop label, we have a drum and bass or whatever, just to stay in the game. So these are a lot of like very desperate measures that happened in the mid to late 2000s. But today in 2025, I don't think that's even possible to do, because now with the internet, you fire up a Substack, you fire up a podcast, the technology, the equipment that you need in order to get started is so cheap. So that is what causing all this fragmentation, which I think is what we need.
I'm thinking about that, this is creative destruction, basically, right? And it's interesting that in a more centralized world, in the time that you were talking about, this actually worked for some time, like going against the creative destruction that you were subject to, right? Because you had money, you had certain PR, marketing, stuff like that, and you could go against these nerds in a bunker trying to steal your content. Although the nerds in the bunker then wrote back, the Swedes wrote back to the Americans, go F yourself, your law doesn't apply here.
That's an epic email.
Yeah, which for me is like that's the essence of the internet, right? You talk about BitTorrent. Parts of that philosophy and technology eventually ended up in Bitcoin. So that process of creative destruction, I think, will be very hard to defend as the company or the institution that is, the subject of it, on one side. And on the other side, if it's a good idea, the new idea or the new tech replacing the old tech, it will actually go faster because we have this fragmented media landscape, where yes, just individuals are also a part of, right?
And the distribution of it is what drives me insane, which is so cool, because like the same way, back in 2009, some random guy in Sri Lanka could download like a movie or like a Wu-Tang Clan album and kind of like listen to hip hop and be exposed to that is beautiful, right? Like they would never ever have access to that content or that culture where they were. So it's the same kind of like, again, I hate this word like democratizing, but that's essentially what it is. You kind of like spread it out, you make it available, and people can actually consume that and kind of like love it, be inspired by it, and create more things because they're inspired by other stuff that is not accessible in the Sri Lankan jungle, right? So it's more about the distribution that is the killer app. And when it comes to like Bitcoin adoption and the way people will in the future understand Bitcoin, it's going to be different. There's no real one true Bitcoin understanding. I think the feature of the broader internet is that people will be exposed to a bunch of different things and be convinced about the same thing from so many different angles. So I think it's like, I don't think the point is to like unify the narrative. It's more like just respect the divergence, and just build tools, build content that meet people where they are, right? Like that's essentially what you were doing, Bram, right?
Yeah, I was just looking up. If you give me 1 second. Yeah, so that's exactly what I wanted to say. Like, even though this, in the bigger scheme of things, is still a small YouTube channel, I just crossed 2 million total views, and Spotify and YouTube combined, like the consumption hours is 600,000 hours in under 2 years, which is insane. Like,
it's so much.
How is that possible, right?
Yeah.
Like, but that is, and I knew that before. Like, I always called that the magic of the internet, but now I kind of like get to experience that. And I think if more people would realize that you can actually do that, and you are into Bitcoin and you want to tell more people about Bitcoin, but please go do it, because this is how we win. Literally, this is how we win.
Yeah.
So, how you talk about Bitcoin is different than I talk about Bitcoin, is different than, in previous episode, I had TC on, who has a YouTube channel, The Road to 1 Bitcoin. He's doing Uber delivery, trying to hustle, get to 1 Bitcoin, like how he talks about it, appeals to different people again. And I think, so I do like the word democratization, of information and access and stuff like on the internet, because it's real, like it's real. But the point is, many people, apparently, I've also learned that along the way, they don't do it, right? And I mean, it's not easy. You have to do work, right? But it is just immensely insane how far your ideas can reach, and what kind of dent you can create in whatever you wanna punch a dent in, basically. So I think more and more people should do that, because in essence, we are already winning, right? Like you said, these old institutions, they hold on to their monetization strategy, the whole narrative that they followed. So for them, it's very difficult to change. And I mean, this is also intimately linked with Bitcoin, right? I mean, like Bitcoin's adoption is linked to distrust in centralized systems. So if you are, I have to think about why the yuppie elite dismisses Bitcoin, right? It's an article by Jesse Myers where he talks about people that are curious and smart but have high trust in centralized systems. They will never get Bitcoin because they cannot change their mind. But if you have a lower trust in centralized systems and you are curious and you understand that it's just constant creative destruction forever, and you have to move all the time, right, to understand what is happening, then you will get Bitcoin. But that is not everyone, unfortunately.
Right. No, right. But it's about, I don't think it's so much more about the smaller pockets of the internet growing huge. It's just like more of the smaller ones getting created and just like splintering out, because they will eventually reach everyone. I don't care if you have a podcast that is listened by 100 people, those are 100 people,
Yes.
and it's a huge number. And that, again, I love to draw parallels to my time in the music business, because I was there in such a crucial time where an entire industry got disrupted just because of the internet. And it's also it was an industry that carries culture, which I think Bitcoin also does. This is kind of like why Bitcoin is destined to win, is because it's not only technology and it's not only money, but there's culture underneath that drives these narrative forward. So we're going to talk about memes in a second, but it's like the culture behind Bitcoin is so damn cool. Like, it's funny, it's deep, it's spiritual, it's hilarious. You find everything inside Bitcoin culture, and I don't think Bitcoin culture is like a monolithic one thing. It's just a combination of all these things that I just said, and you'll find something there for you because it's just so broad at this point. And the blueprint back in the day, when I was working in the music business, if you were like an independent artist and you wanted to like be professional and get money, is you had to go to the office of somebody like me, like a 21-year-old junior product manager, sitting in an office, and then you had to come and like show me your demo, and we had to listen to it, and I'll give you feedback and I'll ask you questions. So who's your target audience, blah blah blah. And then if I liked you, you get signed, and the signing of the contract is essentially access to the distribution. So the big labels, they had distributors like these shops that are selling CDs and stuff like that, and they call them as like, hey, we got this artist, make this order because we're running the marketing. That was the only way you could break through as an artist, because if you were an indie label yourself and you try to call these shops that were selling CDs, they will not even take your phone call, right? It was all about connections and the fiat incentives, essentially. Then comes the internet, and all of a sudden you have like two Swedish dudes creating like a blog where they upload MP3s, and that gets like an insane following all over the world. And now you have to just send this guy an email and just give them your MP3, and if they liked it, they just featured you on the blog, and all of a sudden you have a career now. And it's just like so many barriers were broken down just by that, not only for the artist's sakes, but for these like small bloggers who literally just opened up a blogspot.com. I don't know if you remember, if you go that way back.
Two Dope Guys, remember that blog?
Two Dope Guys, Gnarite, remember Gnarite? Mm-hmm. That was like for underground rap music. It's like some random rapper from Baltimore all of a sudden has a fan base in Australia. Yes. It's like, how beautiful is that? That is absolutely killer. And I think Bitcoin is doing the same thing.
You have to understand what type of battle we are in. This is huge. The biggest battle that you can ever think of, because the people that control the money control the world, and they control, your life's outcome, your financial outcome, the whole narrative paradigm matrix, however you want to call it, that you live in, is designed by other people. And if you're okay with that, you're okay with that. If you're not, you have to look for a solution to opt out of that, right? And I think that's what we've both found, but it takes a long time to get there. And again, I think it's a one by one conversion, people getting it, being curious enough. And so this battle is huge, and it will take years. Although I think we will win if this narrative continues, right? And more people contribute to it, but it will take years just because it's such a huge undertaking. So what gives me hope and strength is based on what you just said. This has all happened before, but this is taking longer because it's such a huge battle.
Yeah, and I think this beast that you're talking about, that is kind of like the final boss, right, is historically been controlling the narratives, right?
Of any technology, right? It's the final boss of any technology.
Yeah, totally. But this particular final boss has had decades of controlling the narratives, right? Like literally steering the conversations and moving masses of people in their minds, to believe certain things,
Yep.
which is, a big reason why understanding Bitcoin requires so much unlearning, because we are victims of these narratives that has been spoon fed into us, our parents, generation before that, and we have perpetuated that through media, the educational system. I mean, you name it, right? They have controlled the narratives. They had it locked down, okay? The splintering, the fragmentation of this narrative is part of why this Bitcoin thing is going to win, because two things. One, legacy players are losing an audience. The way that they propagandize certain things is so obvious. Like, you remember, those videos of like news anchors literally saying the exact same thing. This is a danger to democracy, or Joe Biden is sharp as attack, sharp as attack, sharp as attack. And it becomes so obvious when people put those things together, create a video for zero cost, and just distribute it on the internet for zero cost, and it gets distributed, and people start to unlearn by seeing these things, right?
If you want to self-custody your Bitcoin stack, I recommend the Blockstream Jade Plus. I've been using this premium Bitcoin-only hardware wallet for a few months now, and I love its design and ease of use. What makes it stand out is its open source hardware and software, and Blockstream's unique genuine check, which makes sure that your device is authentic. No backdoors or compromises. You can connect with the Jade Plus however you want: Bluetooth, USB-C, or you can go fully air-gapped with its built-in camera for cable-free QR transactions. The metal case feels solid and the color screen is easy to read, and it connects with your favorite Bitcoin apps like Blockstream Green, Sparrow, and Electrum. Get your Jade Plus today at store.blockstream.com and use code BRAM to get 10% of your entire order. Let's talk about something that not a lot of people think about before it's too late. Where are you storing your Bitcoin seed words? Are they truly secure? I found my solution with Stampseed. It's an elegant all-in-one titanium plate solution with no separate pieces to lose or manage. Your seed phrase gets permanently stamped into pure titanium that withstands fire, survives water, and lasts for generations. Unlike shallow etching methods, Stampseed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, protecting your financial legacy. When you order a titanium seed plate from Stampseed, you can also upload a custom design or your logo to customize the back of your plate to make it fully personalized. Paper seed phrases are a disaster waiting to happen. Secure your Bitcoin with Stampseed for decades to come. Visit stampseed.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to get 15% off your order.
And the second part that makes me super bullish is that creators like you, any other like Bitcoin podcaster that is established to have, whatever it is, newsletter, podcast, or whatever, if you are the indie labels of 2025 of Bitcoin, right? And the big difference between the indie labels that agreed to be acquired by the big labels is because of internet and Bitcoin, you wouldn't take that offer anymore. Because imagine if you have done your podcast for a couple of years, you have your sponsors, they pay you in Bitcoin. That Bitcoin gets appreciated over time. That gives you way more freedom to be super selective about your sponsorships. And it will also make you not interested in a fiat acquisition if that offer came to you, right? I would think so. It's not as interesting to you in 2025 as it was for an indie label that is struggling but creates great music in 2005.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin is the thing that will just continue to make you independent and not be part of the system that is desperately trying to stay relevant and will be even more desperate in the few years to come. I think that is huge.
I'm thinking about what's the name of the last the last spokesperson at the White House under Biden? What was her name? Catherine, the Saint Pierre, Catherine.
Yeah, I know how she looks like, but I don't know her name.
Yeah, with the curls. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, well, you're also looking at it from Europe, right? You're also not an American. But when I look at that and I heard her talk sometimes, I was thinking, it's a test. it's like a test to say something that is objectively just insane and wrong, just to see who cares, right? And I always found that very interesting. But on the other side, the other thing that's also true is that, yes, there are then like, just individual creators that look at that, right, and make a TikTok and show that she's wrong, right, or see someone, show someone who says like, okay, yeah, Biden is in peak, mental health and he's all good, and then there's like this collage of like all this weird stuff that Biden was doing. But even when you look at that, right, and you see the proof in front of your face, it's still very hard to believe that you're being lied to the whole time. If that makes sense, right? So even when you see the truth, even when someone just objectively puts that stuff together, it's very hard to process that.
Yeah, and it's like the Alexander Solzhenitsyn quote, right? Like, they're lying to you. You know they're lying to you. They know they're lying to you. Yeah. We all know what's happening here, but it's still the thing that happens in public or officially. Like, they know they're lying. They know that we know that they're lying, but it still happens.
Yeah.
And it's mind-blowing how the human mind works, right? And that is why I've been saying, and a lot of people don't agree with me, but like Bitcoin, for example, is not for everyone. Just a lot of people are just not going to get it. You can have, and I'm from Argentina originally, right? Like, one of the worst examples of countries that has been totally disintegrated due to inflation. And you would think Bitcoin would be so obvious, and it is for a lot of people, but there's still a lot of people who are afraid of Bitcoin. They don't think it's helpful. They only repeat arguments that have been used in the mainstream media of that country, which is, by the way, something that I track in Bitcoin Perception as well. I track global news in Spanish, in French, in Italian, whatever. And you see the same damn arguments being just distributed, because they also have like their little syndications of like sister companies and other outlets that are part of a bigger network. So like when one article is being published by AP, for example, it gets distributed fast to other ones. So they play the same game, and it's a shame. But people just are not going to get it. You can give them the Bitcoin standard to read. You can talk about Bitcoin all you want, but just a lot of people are just not going to get it. It's just the way it is.
Unfortunately, add, right? Like that is just how it is. And I recently talked to a guy from Kenya. Like there were like big protests in Kenya. I think this is like a year ago. People went to the streets. Like a lot of young people. I don't really know what it was about anymore, but it's a lot of corruption and like the currency is going down, etc. And this was a young Kenyan guy. I think he's like, well, I know he listens, so I don't know. I would say he's like early 40s or something. So I hope that's a compliment.
Shout out.
A shout out to him. But he told me when he talks to his Kenyan friends, like, hey guys, you're pointing fingers, at the people in charge. You should just adopt another money. This is Bitcoin. They're like, no, you're crazy.
Yeah, right.
And these are the people that are in the street, angry, pointing fingers, right? And so
they agree on the problem, they can't agree on the solution. A lot of people are like, oh, things are getting more expensive. What do we want? Do you want sound money? Do you want like not?
Yeah. No, I want another guy.
No, we want to raise the minimum wage. That's the solution.
There's obviously an information asymmetry. Well, it's interesting. When I wrote it down, I said information asymmetry, but I think it's the asymmetry is more about the opportunity, because all the information is publicly available, as you said, right? So all the information is already there. There are dozens of podcasts, hundreds of books, and that anyone can consume. You can also find that for free. You can torrent it, right? Even the Bitcoin standard you can get for free from Saifedean Ammous himself. In a PDF version, right? So all the information is there, but the opportunity is asymmetric because not everyone is paying attention. I wanted to ask, like, what risk or opportunity, or like what risk do you see in that? And I personally see it as, because not everyone will get it, they will eventually be angry when Bitcoin is $10 million. They will be like, hey, why didn't you tell us, right? Or now you are the rich person, or something like that. So yeah, what's your idea around that?
I think the adage of like you buy Bitcoin at the price you deserve is so good for this, because that is going to be very very relevant for the foreseeable future, I think. And I think also, you and I, and I think it's probably like a very common story that, the very first time that you hear about Bitcoin, you probably ignored it, right? Or you were like very skeptical, and it took a while before you came around to your senses, right? And for some people, not like they were kind of like, perhaps they're like in a situation in a country that has I don't know, capital controls on a stronger currency like the US dollar, and you kind of like circumvent that stuff through downloading a Bitcoin wallet and receiving a payment in Bitcoin. So for a lot of people, it's going to be out of necessity, and usually that is the forcing function to understand a novel concept the fastest. But if you are in a position that you live your life, you have 2-3 jobs, you have a family, you got a lot of shit to do and take care of every day, yeah, you're just not going to have the time to really get into these things, right? And I think in the media landscape that we are now in, and it's only going to get worse, and it's going to be a warfare between these influencers and outlets or whatever who's creating content that want to continue to build their audience and also not lose their audience. So they're just going to double down on whatever narrative has worked. And when you really think about it, adoption is really narrative. It's you're confident about something because you're convinced about something, and that conviction is the end result of a bunch of different arguments and debates and information that you have kind of like downloaded to your brain and synthesized for yourself. So I think the way that humans are consuming content and the way all these outlets are going to like battle it out to remain relevant or continue to grow an audience, it's just going to make a lot of people take a lot of time to actually get it, because a lot of people will just fall into the pockets of the internet where Bitcoin is bad, right? And you have these like very divisive narratives of Bitcoin is bad is over here, Bitcoin is good over here, and making the jump once you are like in one of the rabbit holes is going to be extremely and increasingly difficult over time, because the tactics of these influencers and the platforms and their algorithms are just going to trick you to stay in that rabbit hole longer. So the advantage, so that's the risk. And then the advantage that people have is like, hey, if you are able to have the time to look into all that nuance and kind of like get a 360-degree view of all the stuff that is happening at the same time, then, that's your edge. That's essentially why I created Bitcoin Perception as well. That's where you go in to see everything that's happening, because you can log into the platform and you can see these 8 things are now being talked about, but this particular thing is only being talked about in communities and it's ignored by legacy or crypto media, or this trend is only in crypto media and it is not, nobody's talking about it on social. And to be able to get to that understanding on a daily, you have to spend hours and hours behind your laptop, right? So not a lot of people have that luxury, and I think that's the risk and the leverage that you can, the edge that you can get. But it's going to be increasingly difficult.
Yeah. I think two things to add to illustrate kind of what we're up against is, of course, although we laugh about it because they have a very bad way of communicating it. We see the ECB, right? They talk about Bitcoin's last gasp, or even in their last paper, they basically concluded if you don't have Bitcoin, you will be poor, which I found fascinatingly bad. But also, when you talk about gold, for example, right, you have these nice tables where they put the characteristics of gold next to that of Bitcoin. The one thing that gold is best at is the narrative. It's a 5,000-year-old narrative, or rather, the narrative is gold has been used for 5,000 years, which is on one side very strong, right, because it has a great legacy, great provenance in that sense. But if you only have to follow the narrative to pick gold, I would say that's actually a bad thing, right? If the narrative is the only thing next to hard characteristics of the asset itself that you are using as the most positive argument as to why gold would still trump Bitcoin, that's actually a flawed argument in my opinion. So I also find that interesting. Like it is strong, but the fact that they have to use it is actually pretty weak.
Yeah, and I think to be honest, I think that's a good reflection of like how the entire like future of all this is going to look like. This will define this next era. It's not about like when it comes to Bitcoin, it's not going to be about like, okay, what's like what is the contentious fork that we were discussing? What's the tech going to be? What's the consensus around? What is Bitcoin? Is it a database or is it a protocol? Whatever. All of that is not really going to be the thing. It's all about culture. It's all about language, and it's all about perception, because Bitcoin will be reframed by a lot of people that are not Bitcoiners, quote unquote. Bitcoin will be reframed by Wall Street. It's going to be reframed by governments. It's going to be reframed by the ECB, and it's going to be reframed by just creators, right? So I think back to your question about the risk, it's really, the risk is not co-option, but it's more like a narrative ossification. That's the actual danger of ossification. Us thinking to ourselves like Bitcoin is just like one thing and there's only one way to understand Bitcoin, and then us like fighting against absolutely everything. Obviously, we need to fight the ECBs and the people. We need to be able to distinguish FUD from just different angles, right? Like I do believe that there's different angles about Bitcoin that is equally valuable to different people. Like a German autist is going to be potentially only interested in the cryptography aspect of Bitcoin, and that's fine. You don't need to learn about the monetary properties. You can stay in that lane, and that's your lens of Bitcoin. And hey, that's good. And then other people, like me, for example, I'm all about the monetary properties because I come from Argentina. I was thinking, why the hell is inflation such a topic that keeps being discussed every time I visit my family in Argentina? Which led me to the Austrians. And when I read that literature, that is what Bitcoin clicked in my head, because all those previous steps. And I can stay on that lane for the rest of my life, and I'm good with that. And everyone else should be good with that as well. And I think the suit coiners, the paper Bitcoiners, they are going to believe in Bitcoin from that perspective. And even if we don't agree with that, I think it's okay to just like respect that view, because it's really not that detrimental. Obviously, the gold standard is self-custodial Bitcoin and a hardware wallet. But hey, I'm not going to be mad about how a suit coiner is getting exposure to Bitcoin. I really don't care. Everything is good for Bitcoin, except for those FUD pieces that, for the people who are already in the know, is going to be like marketing for Bitcoin, and it's going to be great. It kind of like deepens your understanding and it deepens your mistrust in the establishment. But for other people who are not still being minted a Bitcoiner, they're going to look at the ECB stuff and believe that stuff, and they're going to stay outside. And hey, it is what it is, right? Like what can
Yeah, I agree. And this is also it's funny, right? Because like the whole world is basically a war of ideas, a war of ideology. When you say narrative, I'm thinking about, it's not just narrative, right? It's not just a story, but it's a substantiated narrative. I think once you understand Bitcoin, you can talk about it in a certain way. And then when someone comes to you with an anti-argument or whatever, you can actually have a proper discussion. But I'm wondering if you think that actually matters. Like, does that matter? Does it matter if you're right? Because the people that read the ECB stuff and still think, it's so scary, criminals and Ponzi and Tulip, and will we change their minds with facts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the people that you go to flame wars with on LinkedIn, for example, what do you think about those people? Will they ever change their mind? Do you care if they will change their mind with you after interacting with you, for example?
That's a good point. If I'm very honest, and this is something I learned this week, probably not. Like I don't care. Sometimes it feels like an outlet that I just think like, oh my God, why are you so? I think the thing that triggers me most is that people have an opinion, like a very, very strong opinion. And just by how they talk about Bitcoin, it's just so clear that they don't understand it, right? And I've always learned that you just need to shut the fuck up when you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think that is my personal trigger that makes me like, okay, now I'm going to say something. And sometimes it's really fun. But yeah, to be honest, I don't really care if they get it or not. So actually, this week I realized maybe we should just thank the haters, thank the people that want to create chaos and not help people to escape a money system that isn't designed for them, because that actually gives us the motivation and the joy and fun in trying to do that in our own way, if that makes sense, right? So
Yeah.
I'd rather put energy towards having a good conversation with you than fucking around on LinkedIn, although it is fun.
The entertainment aspect is undeniable. I'm going to give you that. But I think what's interesting in this time of age where ideas and arguments are happening on a public platform like LinkedIn and X is that you have an audience, right? Like you have people, you're not talking to the people that are reading your interaction with this person. So your interaction one-on-one with that person doesn't really matter, right? Like you don't really care if you end up changing that person's mind, but the 100, 200, 500 people who will see that discussion on LinkedIn on their timelines are looking at your arguments, looking at that other guy's arguments and thinking, I think I'm on Bram's side here because that other dude sounds stupid to me. So Bram is probably up to something. Maybe he knows something that I don't know about. Let me check out his podcast or something like that. And that's how you weave them in. So it's not everything is happening publicly with an audience that are silent, that are listening. And I think that's where the education happened, not the actual person that you're debating with, which is interesting.
That is a very good point. That's a very good point. I think, you will probably reach more people just by having the discussion. And then, okay, so then maybe I should go back to the trench.
You should. Yeah.
Okay. Before we move on to what you think we should be doing, maybe to tee that up, if we think this fragmentation will persist, do you either think this will open up new channels for like positive narratives and more like grassroots education or not? Maybe we kind of touched upon this, but maybe to add to that, I think last time and also in other times when we talked about, we're memeing Bitcoin into existence, which I don't think it's necessarily only memes, right? It is the narrative, how we talk about it, how we present ourselves or have podcasts or publications or whatever. I think that is growing. I feel like that is growing. So maybe that adds to that fragmentation. But yeah, what do you think the effect of this will be? Do you think like me that it will just be bigger and bigger, or what is your view on it? Or maybe also what are you seeing in what you're tracking?
I think the fragmentation is going to get worse and worse. And I think, we saw a couple of examples from Bitcoiners and non-Bitcoiners jumping platforms, right? Like for newer platforms. So we had like all the leftists jumping to Blue Sky when Elon took over, right? You remember that? So now they're just like isolated in this Blue Sky thing that I'm never going to touch. So they're totally isolated. They're just kind of like, they probably have like positive feedback loops in between themselves and they just agree on everything and then that's it. And then the likes of you and I will never see those conversations and it's not gonna affect us at all. And then we had a lot of Bitcoiners like last year or something, it was like a mass exodus away from X over to Nostr or like, Primal or Damus. And same thing is happening there, just different format and different conversations and discussions, but it's the same effect of like pocket that voluntarily quits a large platform in favor of a smaller, way more niche platform where everybody speaks the same language and just like repeat and everybody agrees. So if this is like a trend that tells you how the future is going to look like, then yes, more platforms like Blue Sky, Damus, Primal, and who else knows what's going to be invented will appear and people will jump ship. So you can ask yourself, is this good or bad? I don't know. If you are able to jump between these platforms and kind of like your daily life of content consumption is a little bit of Blue Sky, a little bit of Nostr, a little bit of WSJ, then hey, applause to you. I don't think that's going to happen with the majority. I think people are just going to like stay in Nostr, and Nostr is their main thing, and everybody's just going to agree, and let's see how that goes. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's a weird world that we're entering where influence is happening in an individual way. So it's you and your mobile phone just staring into a screen, and you're not really talking to a lot of people. You're not really getting a lot of influence of other opinions. So I think, more extremist things will probably appear because of that. And a lot of like one-sided arguments happening where like you come to the point where you just can't, you don't tolerate anyone with a different opinion than yourself. And that doesn't sound good to me. But at the same time, it does accelerate certain things that can drive an understanding of a deeper thing. Like, for example, Bitcoin. If you are in Nostr and you only care about Bitcoin, the longer you stay in Nostr, you're going to probably learn a lot of things that is interesting about Bitcoin. But in the process of that, you're just going to ignore a lot of other stuff that is happening outside of Bitcoin. And I think you should have like a little balanced view on life. You shouldn't like go too deep in any rabbit hole, to be honest. It's just a personal opinion. I rather listen to arguments from the outside of my sphere just to see what people are thinking. But I understand that that's going to be an increasingly more privileged, state, I guess. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
What strategies do you think that the Bitcoin community could deploy to, maybe bridge these narrative gaps, or invite these legacy media companies that have chosen this, super anti, unsubstantiated, argumentative path, and in that way, I think also kind of like encourage more balanced and accurate coverage, right? I mean, we have someone like Daniel Batten, who is really into the energy and environmental aspect of Bitcoin, where he really like in a super nitty-gritty way dissects any anti-Bitcoin and energy paper or outlet or whatever he does that in. He's probably the best person that does that part. So I think he's a great example. But do you have any ideas around that, or are there any things that you've seen that you think are positive attribution?
Yeah, big shout out to Daniel Batten. He's like a Bitcoin perception power user, and he has given me so much feedback on the platform, and he really uses all the data, and he has used like screen grabs of my charts in his presentations and keynotes. So it's like he's the best. But I think I don't want to sound too esoteric, but I think the future that will kind of like determine how Bitcoin adoption will look like is in the hands of Bitcoin companies, to be honest. I think that the best way for Bitcoin adoption to really happen smoothly is for companies to just build awesome stuff on Bitcoin. And the proliferation of companies building different things that have different value props for different target audiences, combination of all of that is going to drive adoption forward. Because narratives is one thing, but the transformational value of Bitcoin needs to happen in a smooth UX, smooth UI, in an app that doesn't crash, that is easy to use. And I think that's the next leg of global adoption, right? And these brands, these companies, I think the ones that will win the most are the ones that have founders that have a unique voice. So you have, the Adam Backs, the Jack Mahlers, the Jack Dorseys, the Alex Leishman, etc. If these people tap into their unique voice that is backed by an actual business that provides a product, and they are able to distill what is happening in the discussions and say, what is trending now versus what my unique voice is, let me enter that and bring my voice and bring my kind of like my ideas, my beliefs into the conversation. That's, I think, is what going to make Bitcoin even more credible and more useful. and will just kind of like accelerate global adoption, because I think that's the best way to just move masses, right? Like you have an awesome product and people want to use it, and then word of mouth marketing happens and all of that. I think that is kind of like the best bet that we have as an industry, as a space, whatever. That's one. And then number two, memes. That's it. It's like memes are the singular thing where you don't need to have a founder. You can be anonymous if you want. You don't need to have a product. It's just essentially breaking down complex things and making it funny or making it culturally relevant, and breaking it down in such a simple way that you just need 2-3 seconds to really understand the concept and just keep bringing the heat. I think that's going to change the culture and move the culture forward as well. So I don't know if that makes sense, but those are like the super professional level and also the pleb level. Both of them combined will drive the culture forward.
And what do you think about then now, TradFi to some degree? Of course, not everyone yet, but they are getting into Bitcoin. I mean, when I see Larry Fink talk about Bitcoin, I know that this is a line of communication in a corporate company like his. So when I hear him talk, I feel like, okay, he really gets it. I think it's a pity the finance bros already figured it out, But this is a part of the path of Bitcoin, I do believe. So what do you think their influence is going to be?
I think they are obviously huge capital allocators, and they cater to an audience that consists of endowments, family offices, and stuff like that. And it's a huge pool of capital that brings a lot of money in. But on the cultural thing, they're not really moving the needle. Nobody really cares outside of that, right? You have the Bloombergs and the CNBCs, really picking up, in Tom Larry Fink or Jamie Dimon talks about it, but it's just a very close knit group that is, they get convinced about certain things by being in the same room physically. Like it's very shoulder to shoulder. They go to like networking, VIP dinners, stuff like that. It doesn't break out to the mainstream. So if you're wondering why retail is not present in this bull cycle, is because the majority of the capital that is making the price jump are from a pocket of an industry that is just like not culturally relevant, right? That guy that you were talking about, I forget, but he's doing Uber and has a podcast. I think that is the new PhD. Honestly, like I would love when I was like, I don't know, 19, 20.
Dude, hell yeah.
To have the opportunity of like having access to a podcast and just do Uber and make money while I'm learning stuff.
Yes.
Holy shit, that you have such an advantage on life. So and that's how it's going to work. That's how it's going to happen.
Yeah. So when we look at like the next 5 to 8 years, this idea of the Bitcoin rush, 99% of Bitcoin will be mined in 2033. Everything that's happening in the fiat money system, global debt, AI, these coming 5 to 10 years are going to be insane in my opinion. How do you think the narratives will change, or do you have any ideas about how we should adopt to this craziness coming at us? Like I think that, for example, with AI, I feel if Bitcoin is the decentralization of money, basically, and the internet was the democratization of information, AI is the democratization, but also the decentralization of productivity, right? Like the application of the information that you can find all over the internet, basically. And so you even see that in creative outlets, right? Like I think that within 2 years, there will be a full movie totally produced with AI, by AI, it's all AI, that's just true donations going to have like $50 million or something, whatever. Like there's going to be a huge movie that will conquer the internet. That's what I think, right? So even Hollywood, the the master of narratives will be disrupted. Like this creative destruction will go through everything. So there will be a huge change. And so my question to you is, how do you look at that? And also, how do you think we could adjust? Have you ever thought about that?
I'm kind of like still thinking about it. So I don't have like any strong opinions, but I do feel like all the AI slop that you see in terms of content is easy to spot and identify right now, but it's going to be increasingly harder to identify, I believe, just by looking at it nakedly, right? You remember like a year and a half ago when ChatGPT, I think it was 3.5, started making like images and illustrations, and all of a sudden you saw all the blog posts had like a featured image of that, and it's like so ugly right now, but and there's still some people still using that, but everybody was making featured images using 3.5, I think it was, and it became like a thing that you saw everywhere, right? And it was like, okay, it's AI and it's ugly, but it's kind of like started to become normalized until better, AI came around, and then now things look definitely smoother in terms of like thumbnails on YouTube and stuff like that that is created with AI, and also videos to a certain extent. But we're still in that phase where these things are easily detectable, and you can like, okay, you can discard it because it's AI, or if a text has an M dash or something like that. But I think like anything else, to be honest, like any like internet in itself, I think like 95% of all internet users are probably just watching garbage that is just like making them dumber. And then there's the 5% that are really utilizing it to learn and expand their minds. And I think the same thing is going to happen with AI, right? Like you're going to have like a bunch of bots, and you're going to get essentially closer to the dead internet theory than ever before. But that's going to consist of like the 95% of the users who are just like consuming and creating AI slop, and this like negative feedback loop just like perpetuating forever. But then I think again the edge is for the 5%ers who can utilize AI to just I don't know, raise their IQ with 30 points essentially, and become better writers, but they use AI to just accentuate an original idea, or they use AI to gather 5-6 different sources and create one thing that adds all these elements into one to create unique content. So they got to be like smart about it. So I think it's essentially going to look the same as it has always been, just way more accelerated. The 95% of the retards are just going to stay even more retarded, and the 5% that is already smart are just going to get insanely smarter. So I think the division is still going to look the same. It's just the level of content is going to be dumber but smarter.
Maybe more to the point, right? Yeah. So how would you measure success for Bitcoin's narrative, or maybe even media narrative? What would a winning story look like?
Well, that's a really good question. I think I mean, we can be, we are big believers in Bitcoin, right? We are maxis or whatever. We don't really care about any other thing but Bitcoin. But I think it's important to understand that obviously Bitcoin is not perfection either. There's a lot of bad stuff. There's a lot of negative things, and we're still a very nascent technology. We got a lot of shit to figure out still, right? So I think successful narrative would be people, outlets, influencers, whatever, just bringing both the bad and the good. Don't be those outlets that only talk about the good things. Like, I don't know, Bitcoin Magazine, if you go to Bitcoin Perception, they're like 86% positive, and then the rest is neutral. It's like zero negative. That's not necessarily the healthiest thing neither, right? And then the other extreme is BBC, who are like 95% negative and 5% neutral. Bring both, bring the bad and the good, and talk about everything that's happening in Bitcoin, because it's so exciting. There's so much stuff happening, and people that are reading an outlet or following an influencer, they should just be exposed to the good and the bad and everything that's happening, just to get a full 360 view of it. So outlets or influencers who are actually doing that service, that those are outlets that I will personally follow, and I think that would be a successful narrative in itself. But I don't think that's really going to happen. I think, like I said, this has been the theme for our conversation. We are splintering into pockets that are going to battle each other, and it's going to be the Bitcoin bad versus Bitcoin good outlets and influencers just building their audiences and increasing those pockets of the internet further. And people are just going to get stuck in those pockets, and only the few will be able to jump in and out to really see what's happening. So I think it's more of the individual needs to take care of that responsibility and not give that responsibility to the out.
I love that. Yeah. Is there anything else as closing thoughts for this conversation that you would love to share before we watch one of our favorite new memes?
Yeah, I think maybe just I don't know. I don't want this to be like doom and gloomy. I think it's just, it's going to be very hard to navigate these things. But people say that Bitcoin is a mirror. Whatever Bitcoin is, it's a reflection of yourself. And I think I would even add the word cultural into that. Like, Bitcoin is now a cultural mirror. Different tribes will see different things, and to be honest, I think that's healthy. So we're not longer onboarding people with the truth. People are going to onboard themselves with their truth, and I think that is what makes Bitcoin resilient. That's the narrative decentralization that we need. And they will be bickering, there will be contradictions, there will be factions that will disagree and fight with each other, but that again makes Bitcoin stronger and resilient, and is the reason that we will win. So I think that's a nice little bow to a nice little ribbon to put on this conversation.
Love that. Well, awesome, man. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's very informative. I hope that people enjoyed. I want to invite everyone to go to bitcoinperception.com. You can create an account, check it out, see how the narrative changes. And man, thanks so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. It's always a pleasure to riff with you. And I can't wait until next time.
Awesome, man. Well, let's check out our favorite current meme, and then we'll leave the people with that.
Let's go.
All right, man. Cheers.
Yeah, I mean, just there's no intrinsic value to this asset. And now it's starting to be priced appropriately. So it has what's Bitcoin at? 16,000? It has another 17,000 to go there.
Duh. Really?
Yeah, there's no intrinsic value to this product.
We don't! We got it, they don't! Do you understand?